Spread the word. Spread the word.
Torsdagaften klokken 6:30. Velkommen til forelæsningsrækken Forhold mellem mennesker og dyr. Go vegan. That was all I can do in Danish tonight, but the rest will be, and that's the first time we do it in English, this lecture series, Human Animal Studies, and for reasons. As we have a very special guest today, Louise Johansen is with us, and we had a lot of email contact, but we are seeing us tonight for the first time, and we are very happy everything is working. We had some mail contact about how busy our week was and that we couldn't make a test session before, but lucky us, it works. And Louise is, I hope I pronounce it right, from the Dansk Vegetarisk the Danish Vegetarian Society. And special about Denmark is that they have a public plan for plant-based nutrition. And they have money for that. So that's totally different to Germany. We have a plan for meat production and put a lot of money in meat production. And the Danish people go another way. And they also have a plant-based diplomacy. So they not only go this way for their own, but also are willing to help other European nations to go the same way. And that was so interesting for us as we speak about three terms about human animal studies, about vegan nutrition, all these things, and now have a look to our neighbors and learn from them. Louisa, I'm so happy that you're here. You wanted to come with two persons. As it is in autumn, one person got ill, and I'm so happy that you're feeling good and are spending the next 1.5 hours with us. So I give you this crowd of, I don't know how many people, about 120 here and a lot of others in Twitch. And thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for the presentation and the invitation, Jan. I'm very happy to be here and to present some of the Danish initiatives as well. Perhaps some of you have heard of them, but of course I will go a little bit more into depth on these as well, and also come a little bit around like what is the policy steps that we have taken, what is the things that we are mindful of when we do policy work related to more food system transformations. And then also, as Jan mentioned, I will end up telling a little bit about what we call Danish plant-based diplomacy, and perhaps some of you would afterward be interested in reaching out to us and learn more about this topic, where we also are able to go out in EU member state country and actually help and inspire them as well. So I will come across that. So I will just share my screen and have a presentation. I will also try to have some questions along the way, so we can actually also have you involved as well. I will see if I can get this in presentation mode.
Works.
Yeah, works. Started the wrong place, so let's see. Yeah, yes. So just a little bit of the outline for what I had in mind for us the next 1.5 hours. And of course, I would love to have a lot of questions, a little bit about the Vegetarian Society of Denmark. Then, of course, I would love to dive a little bit into the Danish plant-based policy initiatives that we have, but also coming back a little bit to kind of how does this actually happen? What are the key learnings that we have taken from this, which perhaps also would be something that you can use in your advocacy work, whether it's related to policy, but it could also be on public kitchens, health professionals. It could also be in your animal advocacy and so on. And then in the end, come a little bit more into the initiative Danish plant-based diplomacy. So just a little bit about the Vegetarian Society of Denmark. We actually founded in 1896 by doctors, so we're a really old organization, but it's not until recently, since I would say 2016, we kind of starting to become a more professional organization. So when I started in the Vegetarian Society in 2018, we were 4 paid employees, and now we are actually 29 professional paid staff working on our mission to advance plant-based food through knowledge, collaboration, and action. I would really love to also mention, like for us, one of our motto or something that we work on is like that we believe that every plant-based meal makes actually a difference, actually. So someone would be very interested, curious to go a long way, become vegan, vegetarian, perhaps also into flexitarian. Some might not, but could still be interesting to actually have some days where they have a lot of vegetable, uses a lot of pulses and lentils. And for us, that is really what matters, because we need a lot of numbers to change their meals every day, a lot of people to do that. And perhaps somebody would do it all the time, but we need a lot of people to do it at least much more than they do now. And then just a little bit about me. I have a master in sociology here from Denmark. As I said, I worked here since 2018. Beforehand, I worked actually with the National Danish Police, so coming from something completely different to this area. And mostly I work in policy advocacy, both at national level, EU level, and globally, and also do some communication and management. But let's dive into it, because Denmark is in some way as Jan also mentioned, a quite curious case, because we actually the country in the world that actually produces the most pigs per capita. So have a huge also animal production, also known for our butter and bacon. But what we also have seen happening here, which was also something that came along in their agricultural agreement in 2021, was actually the willingness also to kind of set do an action plan for plant-based food, and also adding a funding scheme towards supporting the strategy. And that is actually because we really worked on seeing like this was actually a way for also farmers to have another income stream. Like this could be as much something that they could earn money on as their livestock production. So we were actually quite lucky to be able, which I will also come back to be able to get like a really broad collaboration of political parties actually voting for that we should also have plant-based initiative in Denmark, of course, alongside still a livestock production as well. So I see, so Denmark in some way you can say we're not like because sometimes Denmark is so different, but it's like, yeah, we are not like anyway an angel, but we have done something to actually push forward plant-based food and some food system transformation, which we hope will also others can see themselves in and be inspired by. And yeah, so what we actually saw when we had the political agreement in 2021 was actually all parties in the parliament in Denmark, except actually one, was supporting adding these plant-based initiative actually to this agriculture agreement, actually showing that it was actually possible to find political consensus, a broad range of political parties on this specific issue. So what we actually got in this political agreement back from 2021 was that we got this action plan for plant-based food. And as you can see, there was also, it contains stakeholder inclusion, negotiation. We also have university giving input to what actually was in this action plan. And what we saw, and also what is stated in the you can say the introduction for the action plan, is actually the Ministry for Food and Agriculture, which is actually from the Farmers' Party, and also a farmer himself actually saying plant-based foods are the future, and also saying that increased production and consumption of plant-based food is part of the answers to the challenges that we see related to CO2 emission, increased pressure on nature and biodiversity, also because of health consequences, and of course also for the environment. So that was the plant-based food grant. And then at the same time, in the same agreement, there was actually also political will to actually establish what they called a plant-based food grant. So it was actually a grant who was kind of at having money to actually give out to projects that could help move forward this focus on plant-based foods. And what you can see now is it's actually a fund who have like 170 million euros and also is now permanent from 2030, although we do not know the amount that will be in the fund at this time. And also a thing to pay attention to is that 50% of the funding in this grant is actually earmarked organic plant-based food. So there's actually a close collaboration here and a close connection between organic plant-based foods also and organic as a thing that we actually also want to promote related to plant-based food. And as we said also, I will come about, we have a lot of application for the grant and also have a board, an independent board who actually chooses these different applications and coming with them. So if we dive a little bit, so what are this grant actually supporting? And what they have like 3 focus areas. So one of them is stimulating demand. So a lot about kind of focus on professional kitchens, also the private consumption related to retail and nudging, and then actually also export activity, because Denmark is also a country who exports a lot of foods. Then there's also a part related to stimulating supply. So actually think about how can you make product development also do even more raw materials or getting better raw materials actually for the plant-based food. And as the last thing, actually building a really strong collaboration across this value chain. And what we have seen also since we had the possibility to have the grant started was in 2023. And here you can also see, although it's in Danish kroner, you can see actually the amount in the black one, which is actually available and how much is applied for in the green ones. So you can see there have been an increasing numbers of applicants, but of course also together with an increased number of funding. But what we really find has been we've been very fortunate to see, and also think is super important, is that stakeholders applying for this is a broad variety. So it's not only kind of Green NGO, really interesting and want to focus. We also have the Food and Agricultural Council applying for this. We have university, we have hospitals, we have municipalities. We also have, of course, startups. We have meet other types of organizations. We have working with the hotels. We have also working with conference places, festivals, and attractions. So it's a really broad range of stakeholders actually committing to or being curious about developing the plant-based food sector and actually also being able to provide more plant-based meals. And just to be a bit more concrete to see what is actually been handed out in this plant-based food grant, I just want to give you a few examples also to see like what is actually it's entailing, also for you to kind of see if something related to funding could be possible in your country. What could you actually show the policymakers or show the politicians that this funding could actually go to? And one of the things is there have been a project on lupine and soya to kind of how can we grow it here in Denmark and actually use it for plant-based foods. Another one have been actually developing the curriculum at the agricultural schools and actually also serving more plant-based food at the agricultural schools. These are the farmers who actually grow our food and will be the next generation. So having them having an understanding and learning about this and what is the business opportunities and possibilities here, we find that very, very important. And the one who's actually applying for this project is the Danish agricultural schools themselves doing it. So that is also related to kind of the supply, the one growing the crops for the plant-based foods. Then we also have one who got it was a new education calling the Green Culinary Artisan, or we can also call it a Green Chef. So it was the hospitality school here who actually developed a completely new chef education. Because what we have seen is like, especially women or people being vegetarian, vegan, wasn't able to kind of find a perfect fit within this place as an ordinary chef, because there's a lot of meat. So here we had actually a possibility for them to develop a specific education showing that exactly how we need new artisans who can actually show what delicious plant-based meals look like, and being able to kind of go out in public and private kitchen and restaurants to actually show how this can be done. And what we have seen now, they got their project in the first round, and now they had applied again to kind of redevelop their education. But what we have seen is like much more women apply for this. They are also a bit older, and they actually also kind of stick to the education. So the numbers for people who drop out, it's much lower. So we think this is a very, very interesting case also in kind of how can we get more people curious about making food as well. Another projects that have been directed towards hospitals. So how is it possible to kind of develop plant-rich recipes in hospital if you have like specific needs for people who is hospitalized as well? So here's just some of the example for some of the recipes that's actually been developed. And there is in Denmark a specific platform where professionals have access for free and can find recipes for different kind of groups that they cook for, and also kind of what is the nutritional value and which kind of recipes could be relevant for the people that we actually do meals for. Another quite interesting project is also what we call plant power sport and fitness. So actually working with people doing in kind of the sport and fitness sector, kind of working with this, which we have a lot of things in Denmark, like people voluntarily work in different kind of sports sectors, and talking with them about how can you actually support and make it more normalized to also have plant-based food, and also the importance of the plant-based food for you your performance level. And we actually also go into fitness centers saying what type of meals are available there beside, protein bars with a lot of protein from cows as well. Also, would there be other possibilities to get extra protein as well? And then another thing is, of course, the product development, which is also super important here. Just a product also kind of quite new, using fermentation as kind of the basis for this product, but also based on a lot of materials that's actually grown in Denmark, which you might also have in your countries. Like, is there a certain kind of raw materials here? We have potatoes, we have corns, we have beetroot, which are some of the things that's actually grown really well in Denmark, using it together with the fermentation to actually create a quite interesting product you can use in a variety of forms. And I think that's the last one I have. So notching at conference centers, also working with when people go out dining, or if you have big conference center who have a lot of people coming, like how can we also make the plant-based food more normal, be the first choice, working with the default as an option if that is the first one, and really all of these kind of knowledge that we have related to notching, and actually say how can we actually implement it so people are using it, and actually also hopefully also having the visitor or the customer actually really enjoying these plant-based foods and meals. Yes, so that was just a little bit about the things that have been happening in Denmark. And I can also perhaps share just briefly that, and perhaps some of you already know, that in November 2024, there was also a new political agreement where Denmark also added actually got a climate tax, which is going to be implemented from 2030 as well, with a certain number per CO2 emissions. Coming from in 2030, it's around 40 euros, coming up to in 2035, 100 euros per CO2, 1 kilo of CO2 emissions as well. And then there is some added layers, like if the farmers introduce some kind of different kind of climate tools, they will actually have the possibility to get a reduction. So that is one of the part in this new agreement from November 2024. The other one was more added funding for the plant-based food grant. And the third one was a lot about kind of taking nature out and also kind of restoring or kind of not using these places would have a lot of CO2 emissions. So actually see how can we create more space for nature. But perhaps quite curious to you is also like, how did we actually get there? This is hopefully also for you to get some inspiration. Perhaps some of you have already tried some of these things, but just to kind of see, get some ideas. I have also added some questions along the way that I hope we can dive into, or at least get your perspective to. So one of the things that we have find really important is what we call get the data right. So when you kind of working in policy, so really pay attention to use high quality data for published studies, what is peer reviewed. Do not compromise on this, because actually providing data, for example, for politicians, if there's something that is either for high, you can get miscredited. So really also stand firm also on the data that is based on science, and also use it when you communicate it. So as we said, take science seriously. And actually what we see also, we still see that information work, but we also know a lot about like people also need, like the food environments also play a really important role when we have to change our habits and initiative as well. And of course, also when you work with science, there is a lot of nuances. So also really pay attention to those because they can also be quite important in your advocacy work when you use and work with those. So what we can say also related to data coming into the concrete context in Denmark is actually that we got some new dietary guidelines in 2021, which was based on the Eat Lancet report back in 2019, which we know kind of both look at around what is a healthy diet and then added the layer. So also kind of it's a healthy diet, but how does it also look climate for the climate as well? So when we had the new dietary guideline, a lot of them was based actually on this factual science related to the Eat Lancet. So, and especially what I would like to highlight from the dietary guidelines, and now we also know a lot of countries have coming along. We know from Finland got new dietary guideline. I think Austria as well. Also, a lot of other countries has also starting to look into this as well. But some of the things that we, of course, look very much into and is supporting our policy work was also that we got a clear recommendation on 100 gram of pulses every day. And on the meat side, it was like the maximum 350 grams meats every week. So it was quite a difference. And we also, and as you see also, like on average, the Danes eat, tremendously much more, while also for pulses, I think it's around maximum 5 grams. So there's a lot of work to be done, but having these as kind of a foundation when we do policy work, and actually also, of course, when the government official are doing it, it's very important. And they have also made really a sound basis here in Denmark for also kind of the advocacy work, and all actors in the food system in Denmark is also kind of referring back to these. And another thing also related to diets, can practice see, it's an older study as well, but also sometimes looking at the nuances. So actually, like when we need to kind of see how many people can we actually feed, like, and of course also for me, you can say still like the different type of diets can feed different people. And what perhaps could be curious for someone is kind of a vegan diet can actually feed a bit less people if you have what they have called a dairy-friendly vegetarian diet, also related to kind of like in the world, what is actually possible to be grown. Some places have very fertile ground, other places don't. So that is also kind of just as an example of also kind of the nuances there is when we talk about the food systems and what is actually important if we want to feed a growing population as well. Then also when we talk about here and what we've been very keen on, it's actually what we have called talk with the ones that you disagree with. So one of the things that we have been doing early in our advocacy work is actually going out, especially doing presentation at agricultural school. perhaps being some of the more conservative stakeholder, but actually reaching out to those that you disagree with to actually get a better understanding. Why are they there? What are their arguments that they're coming with? And what is the common ground that we can actually create together if we can create a common ground? And in that, I actually have already had built in a reflection. So for hope for you in the chat, if you would like to reflect a little bit on this question, I hope you can see everything. But if you kind of play the role that you are representing a green NGO in a panel session in this agricultural schools with a lot of attendees from the farming sector. And you have a young farmer who's studying industrial pig production. And he actually asks you in front of all these people whether he should stop studying or industrial pig production or choose a different specialization instead. What would be your recommendation, or what would you actually recommend him to do, and what would be kind of the arguments that you would use? If there is some reflection, or is that
So that may take some time,
yes,
and I hope some people are writing in there. So
yeah,
so the easiest way to answer this is if you say yes, put a 1 in the chat, and if you say no, put a 2 in the chat. But maybe you can write something more in the chat so that we learn of that.
yeah,
So it makes a difference if he asks me in front of 250 others or if he asks me 1-to-1.
yes,
But
yeah. And we also just attending a presentation in an agricultural school this Tuesday. And it was quite interesting because a lot of them also said they really care deeply about animals. And then, of course, for us, it's a bit kind of like this connotation about deeply caring. And then you're still kind of, for example, taking the cow away from its mother. So also kind of this, what is their understanding of animals and how we relate to them, and what do you think is actually important? But we also got some of the students coming up and saying afterward, you're not as bad as we thought you were, which is actually sometimes what we are hoping for, just to kind of have and say, like, even that we coming from the vegetarian society as well, we still can also put a little bit, we can put ourselves into their shoes and actually also kind of have some discussion about where to go and why we could think that at least the diversification related to kind of crops could be also a deer, or to plant a seed in their head, also looking into other types of production methods and ideas.
we have one answer. So
Okay.
my answer would have
Yeah.
been yes. Stop
Yeah.
studying that and do something else. But Ellen is much more
Nuanced.
reflective than I am. She says, well, maybe I would first like to know what he's aiming at. Maybe he's interested in better conditions for pigs, and that's his motivation. Ah, great. Would be different from many other possibilities.
Interesting. Wow,
Yeah.
very.
And
Yeah.
Matthias says a response could be to ask him whether he should stop or continue to study. So ask him. And Ellen says maybe zero meat is not the next step.
Mm,
Yes.
interesting.
Or
Yeah.
maybe it is.
Yeah.
Martha said, I would ask how he likes his topic and why he chose it. Then, according to what he says, I would recommend to stop and turn to plant production.
Interesting. Very nice. Cool. Very nice. I hope you can save those. I can also
Yes,
use them
yes,
in
we
our
save
way.
them. Yeah.
So I will move a little bit forward as well. Thank you so much for the one who gave their perspectives in their chat. Yes. So of course, what we really have been working on and still keep on working in is what we call create alliances and build bridges. Because what we at least have seen here in Denmark is, like, for this to be able to move forward, it have been really crucial to have a lot of stakeholder engaged and actually pushing forward for the same things here in Denmark as well, or at least just be not working against it, but perhaps some would be more neutral, but some could also be very positive and really work towards having more plant-based food. Others can say, like, we will not work actually for it, but we will not kind of work against it. And I think that is also when we kind of work in our policy work, you will not have everyone cheering for it, but if they at least do not kind of put a stick in the wheel, we are actually quite quite some way, you can say, as well. So when we talk about building alliances, what we have done in Denmark is one of the examples I have here was that we together with Organic Denmark created in 2020 what we call Danish Center for a Plant-Based and Organic Future, where we together work to kind of strengthen the knowledge base for more plant-based organic food system, again from farm to fork. And also the idea here and the target is based on the Atlantis Commission scenario and also connected with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And together with them, what we have done is like we have a platform where we do a lot of projects, especially focused on professionals in a variety, as I showed before, in a variety of areas where they can actually make a difference and introduce more plant-based food or create even more knowledge around this topic as well. So that was been quite crucial for us to kind of have this really strong alliance with Organic Denmark. So also, as you see here, we kind of said what we have in common. Definitely also, if you're really focusing on organic, you will also need to have much more plant to actually balance if everything should be more and be organic as well. And also we have some commonalities in fall to human health when we talk about pesticides, of course, also nature sustainability. And we also have some motivation, of course, animal ethics as well. But also as something that you show here, there is also something that there's a bit outliers as well for the livestock part and also for more plants. Another collaboration which also took place in 2020 was that we were invited by the biggest farmers union in Denmark, the Council for Agriculture and Food in Denmark, to actually write this plant-based food strategy, focusing solely on R&D and how can we develop the plant-based sector. So nothing about reduction in livestock, because as I will show, that is not what we can agree on, but we could agree on, and it was important to have them on board and saying like, we are interested in supporting a strong and creating a strong plant-based sector as well. And having them on board was actually something that was created through our network for plant proteins as well. A network that is free for stakeholders from farm to fork, a place where we share knowledge and new evidence, share, exchange experience. And one of the first events we had was actually in the parliament together with the Plant-Based Business Association and another business stakeholder. And that is kind of where they attended and actually opened their eyes to see, okay, this is actually something that we also could see have an interest for our members, you know, for the farmers as well. And as you can say here, the commonality is a lot less, but what we can agree on is still like more plant-based production. Actually, it is something that could be valuable for their members, for the farmers as well. But we do not agree on is kind of the reduction in livestock. They will not kind of support it, and they would actually defend it as well also. But we still could see like more plants is a narrative and a commonality that we actually have. Then another things that happen also kind of to spur, especially the action plan for plant-based food, was that we together with other green NGOs back in 2020, everything happened in 2020, was actually doing this vision report where we actually kind of focused on a more organic and plant-based food system, focusing a lot about production and consumption, and actually have a really strong focus on the market potential to say like, there is a market potential here. Some stakeholders, there's a project, there's stakeholders working on this, there is a market, you should tap into this as well. And one of their recommendation also in this report was actually the action plan for plant-based food, which was later a part of the political agreement that we got in 2021. So here, this collaboration have been quite crucial. And also just an example kind of to show this collaboration of stakeholders is that after the vision report, the ad you see to the left was posted in a lot of the biggest Danish newspapers to actually see politicians. We are a lot of stakeholders, both from the business side, the green side, from startups as well, and from middle-sized SMEs who actually want to kind of have more funding or have a more clear strategy towards plant-based food as well. And when we later did it here, the ad to the right in the picture, then it was before this last agreement we had in November 2024. And you can see there we had even more organization and logos. We actually also have a bank supporting this message getting through to the politicians, saying you should also allocate even more funding and create even more focus on plant-based food. So for this to show, it's just kind of these different types of collaboration have just been very, very crucial to kind of move the plant agenda forward in Denmark and actually show politicians, policymakers, government officials that there's a lot of stakeholders who are willing and interested in supporting this and are supporting this. So doing policy related to this is not something that they should be afraid of. They would not experience a backlash. They will actually experience support from the whole food value chain in Denmark and some of the most prominent stakeholders also in the food value chain in Denmark. Yes, I think it was this. Just a few takeaways as well. Also, as I have been stated here, also like making policy work is sometimes also say what is political possible. Also, perhaps thinking a little bit into what we call strategical sequences. Is there some initiative, some project, some ideas that needs to come before something else to actually create the momentum, create the collaboration, create the support that you actually need to have policy in this space as well? Then also, again, strategic partnership, long-time partnership, really good relation to a lot of stakeholders is very important. And of course, we definitely see getting farmers on board on the message, more plants that we can agree on has been very crucial and are still super important in a Danish context as well. Then what we also hear something is also what we try to do and have tried to do in the policy initiative. It's kind of uniting this whole food agenda also, but also still kind of getting it together with the tech business segment. So actually kind of trying to insist on that we need a lot of solution because people are not the same. They change differently. They have different things that they would like to see that motivates them. And in that way, we need different kind of solution, different types of food that could inspire people to actually eat much more plant-based food as well. And from, of course, our perspective, we still think that NGOs can play a really crucial and important role as a bridge builder between a lot of different kind of stakeholders to have a really pragmatic stay in the middle. Perhaps it sounds a little bit odd. We have a mission, we have a vision as well, but still being able to kind of see the overlapping interests and actually being a bridge builder, getting stakeholders together and agreeing on something that can actually move this agenda forward. Then a few cases as well, also, if you want to play along with me a little bit more in related to collaboration. So we have 3 different here. So if some of you are curious about giving your input to them, so kind of what could some of the tensions that could be? So how can we work on those? For example, as vegan activists demonstrated on a cattle farm on Organic Day. Also, we had a vision report where we actually talked about reducing livestock as well, which was co-authored with Organic Denmark, and there was a lot of backlash from Arla and Danish Crown, some of these big livestock producers in Denmark. And also for us as an NGO, sometimes a lot of stakeholders are telling us we are too organic. And then on the other side, a stakeholder of ours telling that we should mention it more. So how do you actually balance these reaction? What would be kind of when you want to kind of keep collaborating with stakeholders, how can you solve some of these disputes that could arise along the way? If any of you have some input or just ideas, I will give you a little bit of time here, and perhaps Jan can also see in there.
Yes, I can. While
you
the crowd
can.
here while the crowd in Zoom here is still thinking and writing, I can give you 2 more answers from Twitch for your last question.
Yes.
You know, the one with the 250
Yes.
people audience. And he is writing, maybe it's better for him to switch to a different plant-based agriculture because sooner or later things will change. So it's better for his morals and his business future as well.
Yes.
And Foxar writes, I would tell him to give up his studies immediately because we are all animals and are not allowed to eat anything that has eyes.
Interesting.
And then there are a lot of questions. We will remember all
Rabbit.
these. We will
Yes.
put down all these questions and we'll discuss them at the end of the presentation. So
Yeah, I can see I move along.
that will do Teresa afterwards.
Okay,
At the
I would do.
beginning.
Yes, okay. So there was just about,
Yeah.
like, again, of course, when you do collaboration, there will sometimes happen like something that could be out of your control. But again, to think about how can you kind of navigate between some of these tensions that there might be, and how can you solve it in a way that you can still have a collaboration which are important to you as well.
Yeah. And you have the duty to be diplomatic, as
At
we
least
would
that is
just say, okay, the vegans are demonstrating at the cattle farm, we will join them.
Yeah. True, that is also a way. So everyone can do that as well,
Yeah.
also. And then one of the things that we also wanted to ask is like, or looking forward is kind of how can we ask politicians for the right thing? So of course, in our advocacy work, that is like that we have the focus on asking a more plants instead of the reducing livestock. So that's been kind of a focus and a messages in our policy work. Of course, we also feel like it's really amazing that we have different kind of NGOs and stakeholders using different kind of messages. But what we have felt to move this agenda forward, that is some of the things that we have been focusing on as well. And Jens, then one of the things to kind of mention here is that what we have trying to do with the ask that we have is actually, of course, inspiring politicians to actually do something, of course, together with data as well. And then also being a bit opportunistic, looking at what is the opening, what is the policy discussion, what is the agreement that is going on, where we can actually get some policy into this related to plant-based food, because it would actually help some of the issues that is actually there in the policy discussion. And to the left, we have a politician from one of our events saying like for her, working with us have been like a really big eye opener, also in the way to how to communicate with others relating to this, to actually create a collaboration on some important topics as well. So of course, also some of the examples that we do is also that we see that their message matters. Some of the examples that we use as well, of course, when we work with stakeholders in this, is really focus on the lack of the level playing field. So saying also plant-based producer doesn't have the same possibility. If there was the same possibility, we would see a completely different market. We wouldn't see the same possibilities that the livestock have. So what we also, of course, are advocating for is actually moving some existing subsidy that could be created or allocate funding for plants as well. So we also kind of been very focusing and moving, talking a lot about like which carrots can we give the stakeholders in this to actually have them to move to more plants instead of putting more adding more you can say demands, or for example. And of course it is also a balance as well, but we feel like there's a lot of good energy to saying this is something that we actually would like to support doing as well. And also when we talk about a level playing field, because we also work with the plant-based food grant, it's also relating to some EU regulation that we're also working on, saying actually if you have projects and you do some kind of processing, then actually plant-based food are not allowed to have the same kind of support as if you have, for example, milk or dairy products, and that doesn't make any sense, right? So that is something there that you find out along the way working with this, that there are so many places where there's some kind of definitely not a level playing field for the sector. And then again, highlighting also, we know from surveys that the majority would like to eat more plants, but also we can see at least the case in Denmark, especially for the consumers, they move very little. And that is also why we have a strong focus on the projects that we have, but also in general that actually supporting professionals. Also because professional doing meals every day are doing a lot of meal to a lot of people. So for them to inspire others, knowing how to produce delicious plant-based meals would also reach much more people than just having advocacy to like one citizen at the time as well. So really have a focus also, like if we want to move this ahead, we need training, we need nudging, we need product development actually to make people find this delicious and inspiring as well. And then, of course, also like when we work on it, we know, of course, a lot of countries actually eat super plant-rich as well already and are already very accustomed to meat imitation, especially, and have done it for a long time. So if you're also looking into kind of the export, perhaps we in Europe, some countries have a strong focus on whole foods, but also if you look to Asia, they are much more accustomed to different type of meal alternative. So that would also be interesting for food producer, for example, in your countries, to say like, if we need to do export, we can also do something that perhaps will not be the case, something that we eat in like somebody will be craving, for example, in Europe, much more to a lot of countries in Europe, much more focused on whole food and doing something that is not kind of meat related, but a lot with the pulses, you can say. And then, of course, also the message that you have, everyone now talking into kind of this geopolitics and food security. It's also been something that we are kind of focusing on. We can see that it's a strong thing that we are able to produce food. We are kind of very vulnerable also when we kind of import a lot of fertilizer, especially from Russia. So there's all of these kind of geopolitical arguments also which could be important to use in the policy work that you actually do. And then what we also talk about, and I will come back to it, is what we called diversity in diets also. And I will come back to this a little bit because I have a graph I would like to show you. Don't think it will come into, it's just kind of a policy tool that we actually use. Yeah, we come into here. So sometimes, of course, it can, when we are here, we say like, of course, we want as many of people to eat even more plant-based, be vegan or be vegetarian. But we also kind of see normally if you look at a population, they will kind of span themselves about this kind of normal distribution as we have shown here as well. And you will see like what we need to do is actually come as close to the dietary guideline as possible if we want to stay within the planetary boundaries as well, if they are kind of aligned with these as well. But then we also know that not everyone is alike. So it's not everyone who would adhere to these dietary guidelines. And therefore you will have some people having a high level intake of meat still. But then it is even more crucial and important that you actually make it so easy, so accessible, so normal for people who actually want to eat even more plants, that they can actually do it. So we have the possibility to balance the diets that we have as well also. So that is a very strong focus and a message that we try to also kind of talk with our politician about, say, you need to make it accessible, you need to make it cheap, normal, all of these things actually, because you need to have a lot of people driving this even more plant-based food, because we will still see people having, unfortunately, a high level of meat intake, because there will be some people that perhaps would not be interested in moving at all. And instead of perhaps, it's my opinion, using so much energy on those, we should use a lot of energies who's the ones who's actually interested and curious about it, because we can move them much more and much quicker. And that is what we really, really need at this point in time. So just kind of to sum up as well what we have been through, super important with data. A lot of you would work with that as well, also as part of your advocacy work. Also meet the people you're disagreeing with, like ask yourself to be invited to do a presentation, ask yourself to come to have a meeting or attend events where you know that people are not looking at the topic the same way as you do, to understand these better, get some talks. Sometimes you also kind of meet just as a person together to meet the persons behind the job as well also. Then, of course, for us, definitely a strong focus on creating alliances and build bridges. Ask what is the right policy to have to get the most momentum, and ask actually for something that could be put forward. And then also the message actually matters. And then as a last thing, be patient. So I know we have a lot of things going on in Denmark, but we have also worked with it for a very long time. I think my colleague has been here since 2010 working with it. So there's also a lot of things that have been going on, and it is taking some time. We need to be patient, even though we want to see a lot of change. And then also kind of building a strong collaboration and alliances would be something that would be able to move you also very much more quickly forward, to have a lot of stakeholders behind the ask that you actually have than going out to ask something by yourself. Yes. And we are actually approaching that you will also have a lot of questions for me. But of course, I promise you to come to this Danish plant-based diplomacy. And it's actually kind of initiative that we have sprung out for a lot of the learnings that we had in Denmark, and saying like, we hope that some of the learnings that we have in Denmark could be interesting for other countries, especially in Europe. And how can we inspire them to actually perhaps suggest action plan for plant-based food? It could also be called something completely different, and also see if there could be some kind of funding for all of these things that you actually want to change. And behind this plant-based initiative, we have managed actually to get all of these stakeholders on board, which are also a really stronghold when we go out and talk with other countries, or when we do events, actually saying that there's a lot of stakeholders from across the food value chain who's actually behind this Danish plant-based diplomacy. And you can see their stakeholders here on the screen.